Okay, today we're going to talk about head and neck restraints. These were invented 40 years or so ago and became popular in racing, professional racing anyway, about 20 years ago after Dale Earnhardt's death. And the short version is, these are designed to stop basilar skull fractures, which means your head comes off your neck. I'm not a doctor, I won't go into the details, but long story short, 10 years ago or so, amateur racing started to require a head and neck restraint for every driver, and nowadays it's almost impossible to get on track in a race car without some form of head and neck restraint. We are huge fans of head and neck restraints. You'll see our drivers wearing them anytime they're on a track and it's feasible. Even when we're testing things as boring as a new Camry and we're at the test track, we'll be wearing some form of head and neck restraint. Put simply, they have very little downside. They're not really uncomfortable, they don't really slow you down or anything, but the upside is huge. They could keep your head attached in a crash, and we use our heads like once a week at least, so we like to have these. The two basic styles you'll see are a traditional HANS, which goes over your neck, seatbelts hold it down, it attaches to your helmet, and then I've raced with this one for a decade or so. It's seen some things, believe me, but I recently switched to a Simpson Hybrid S, which is a lot more complicated looking, but the basics are, instead of the racing belt holding it down and keeping your head in place, this goes on kind of like a backpack and buckles down. So what's the point of this? Because a lot of straps, I know I don't look cool anyway, but this makes me look less cool. The cool thing about a Hybrid S is it restrains your head against your body. See, it stays attached and strapped, and what that means is you're not relying on the racing belt to hold your head in place. I mean, it helps, it's certainly got spots for the belt, but what this does is let you get in any car, 3-point belt, 5-point belt, 6-point, anything like that, and you can have a head restraint. This also makes driver changes easier. I'm a big fan of endurance racing, and with my HANS, no matter how much I practiced, how much I tried, I would always get it stuck on the belt or on the drink tube or something. And with this, it stays real self-contained, and no matter what I do, I can kind of squirm out of the car and nothing gets hooked, nothing gets caught. And I also don't have to worry quite as much about one of my co-drivers missing a shoulder strap and having me with one side of my head tied down in the car. So, two main styles. Simpson Racing has both. We are big fans of the Hybrid these days, but the HANS is another good option. One other reason I'm a fan of the Hybrid S is it offers some side impact protection. See, it has this additional tether here, which theoretically keeps your head a little better attached if you get hit on the side. It does limit mobility a little bit. There's trade-offs with everything, but for me, the extra protection's worth it. I made my position clear. I'm a fan of the Hybrid S, but let's actually do a fair comparison and figure out where each one of these shines. I'll start out with the HANS. People can debate this for years, honestly, in the paddock, but the main thing I think that makes the HANS better is you get a lot more freedom, basically, with the HANS. This is one of the newer sliding tether models, which means you can rotate your head left and right actually a fair bit. Because it's not tied to your body, it's tied to your belts, it's very easy getting in and out of the car. You can move your head around, you can look down to do your belts or check your gloves or look at, trying to figure out how to get the key in the ignition, that sort of thing. So a HANS definitely gives you more freedom, at least on me. And the other thing about a HANS is, yes, you have these pads pressing down into your chest, but you don't have basically a belt around your chest. I can breathe just fine in a Hybrid S, but you'll notice wearing it for the first couple races. If you like to take real deep breaths when you're about to hit something, you're not going to be able to do that in the Hybrid. You'd prefer the HANS. But they're both good options. Price-wise, they're actually very comparable. The Hybrid S is the only one that can do a 3-point belt and still restrain your head, but the cheaper Hybrid models are more or less the same sort of format with the belt under your body, and they start around $400 or $500. Same with the entry-level HANS, which I think $449, something like that. So both start around $500. Both can go up to well over $1,000. Kind of personal preference and what kind of cars you drive is what's going to influence the decision more than anything else. One really, really important differentiator and kind of the main reason I think you see a lot more HANS in entry-level racing is this is really easy to share. There are different sizes. You have to kind of size it to how wide your neck is, but switching drivers is as easy as putting it on and off and 2 hooks on the helmet. So if you're, say, a budget endurance racing team, something like that, you have 4 different drivers and not all of them can afford to buy a $500 HANS, you can share pretty easily. Now the Hybrid, in comparison, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different buckles that have to be adjusted anytime you change drivers with this device, unless everybody on your team happens to be identical twins. This means that you can dial it in to your own personal preference a little bit, which is necessary because it's so tight and kind of so belted into you, but you're not going to be able to easily share a Hybrid with your teammates. what do you need to do to be able to use a head and neck restraint on track? Fortunately, it's pretty easy. Step 1, buy a head and neck restraint. Step 2, just going to have to put 2 little anchors into your helmet, one on each side here, and any Snell SA 2015 or newer helmet will have threaded inserts on the side, and these off-the-shelf anchors just screw right in. And then put your HANS on, clip it on your anchor, and you are good to go. So when should you plunk down $500 that could be spent on tires or shocks or something honestly more fun on a head and neck restraint? Here's my stance. We've gone over when you need one per the rules, basically as soon as you're turning wheels in anger on track. I think you should have one of these on anytime there's a chance you're going to hit something very, very solid, very, very fast. Notice that's a lot more circumstances than just wheel-to-wheel racing. We try and wear a head and neck restraint anytime we're on track, period. There are no organizations that I know of that will ban you from wearing one, so I would get one as soon as possible. Before you have a big crash is kind of the best time to buy any safety gear, but there's no time too soon to buy some form of head and neck restraint and use it correctly and use it every time you're on track, because you're going just as fast or faster as at a test day if you're doing it right. We know that most racing safety gear has a finite lifespan. Helmets get a new Snell certification every 5 years, racing belts last a couple of years. No different with head and neck restraints. HANS, for example, you're going to need to get it recertified or replaced every 5 years. Fortunately, that's pretty cheap and easy. We actually had this one recertified back in January at Simpson Racing. It's not very expensive, somewhere around $100 depending on if it needs tethers or pads, that kind of thing. But basically what recertification does is it lets a professional look it over, replace the nylon that wears out, and make sure that this will still protect you in a crash. So head and neck restraints are a bit of an investment. $500 is nothing to sneeze at, or $1,000 in the case of the Hybrid S. But because you're able to recertify them every 5 years or so, it's not that bad and kind of a buy once, cry once type of thing. You'll be able to use one for years and years and years. Your neck will probably outgrow it before it times out. Hopefully we've made the decision of whether or not to buy a head and neck restraint and which one to buy if you do decide you need one a little bit easier, or at least kind of shown you a couple different angles here. To learn more, we recommend you go to Simpson Racing's website. They have dozens of different models at all kinds of different price points and a couple easy tools to help you kind of compare and decide which one you want. If you want to see more content like this, make sure you like and subscribe to Grassroots Motorsports on YouTube, and we'll see you at the track.
Support brands that support Grassroots Motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.